Good day, everybody. Because I'm speaking to many people from all over the world, whatever time of the day it is, I bring you greetings from the Fidelis Leadership Institute. We're here with yet another of our faithful, available, teachable talks. We call them FAT Talks. And these are really conversations that matter, conversations that are about, that ask real questions and are looking for authentic answers from authentic leaders that have lived ethically. This is because as the Institute, we are trying to build a critical mass of ethical leaders across Africa. We believe that ethical leaders are the solution to Africa's development crisis. Why? Because we feel that we have everything that it takes to develop this country, this continent, and we've just been failed by the people that have been stewards for it. And not because they are bad people, but because maybe nobody ever told them how to be, because they inherited a failed system when they left, when colonialism left the continent. They inherited a failed, corrupt system, and I think that it's even gotten worse now as we speak. So the Fidelis Leadership Institute does the FAT Talks as a thought leadership drive to ensure that our young people on the continent understand that you do not have to be wicked to prosper. You do not have to be wicked to be influential. And that if you are a good person, you need to participate, you need to compete, you need to stand out in order to get the power and influence you need to cause good. So you're welcome. My name is Fiona Wall. I'm your host tonight, and with us in the house is yet one of those ethical leaders that have made it in many spheres and is known for his ethics. This is none other than Chacha Odera, known as Chacha Hilary Odera, Senior Partner, Oraro Company Advocates in Kenya. It's, I think, the second largest locally owned law firm in Kenya, which means second largest locally owned law firm probably in East Africa. And Chacha is the senior partner there, and he practices in the dispute resolution practice group. He has 34 years experience of legal representation, and he has worked both locally and internationally in commercial dispute resolution, constitutional law. He's a practitioner of electoral disputes. I think some of you might have seen him in the famous election petitions, the last few, I think at least the last 2 or 3, employment and labor law, insolvency and property law. He has been ranked by leading international legal directories such as Chambers and Partners and Legal 500 as a leading lawyer in dispute resolution and employment. In the Chambers Global 2022 rankings, Chacha received a plethora of praise from the Kenyan legal community, who actually emphasized that he was full of wisdom, courteous, respectful, hardworking, a team player, and what we at Fidelis are very interested in, a man of high integrity. And these are his colleagues. This is a peer review. He also maintains his cool and is highly effective. This is from his clients, and these are reviews that are given to international rating companies. Chacha was also recognized as the overall lawyer of the year 2019 at the Nairobi Legal Awards, hosted by the Law Society of Kenya. He is deeply passionate, so he says, about philanthropy, pro bono and mentorship. I think that the latter I can attest to. I've been one of those beneficiaries. He has taken up various notable pro bono cases over the years, including representing one of the leading Kenyan media houses in an inquiry regarding the attack on its printing press. He's also mentioned among young advocates over the years, having raised and mentored quite a few eminent advocates and politicians in Kenya. He has served presidents. He has had tea with presidents. I think today, Chacha, you'll tell us something about Kenneth Kaunda, the late. And yet, he is one of the probably the most the most humble people that I have met. He holds a Bachelor of Laws from the University of Nairobi, Kenya, and a postgraduate diploma in law from the Kenya School of Law. He's an African man with one wife, happily married. How many years now?
This year it will be 32 years.
32 years. And he has 2 fantastic sons.
Yes, 2 boys.
Yes, 2 boys.
And I have a daughter.
Oh, and a daughter, yes. So Chacha, you're very, very welcome. Please say hello to everybody.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiona, for inviting me, for hosting me. It's always nice catching up with you and just discussing a wide range of things. I am quite amused by your introduction and especially a description of what you say I am. You know, one of the things which is interesting, that where I come from, that is Kenya.
Yes.
There is always this thought that it's difficult to place in the same sentence the word humility with the community I come from. Those are
the lures.
Yes, that is deemed to be a paradoxical statement. But if you say that I'm humble, then well, I take it as a compliment. Thank you, Fiona.
You're welcome. So I guess you've redeemed your ancestors and the rest of your kin. So Chacha, I've said so many other things about you that are probably written internationally, or as you say, my perspective. Who would you say you are?
Yes, that's a difficult question to answer because I am who I am, where I am, and at what time you ask me who I am. Today, I am in Kampala, and I was
Oh,
here.
You're very welcome to Kampala,
Yes,
by the way.
thank you. Yes, what brought me to Kampala was really teaching. I was teaching some bankers certain requirements regarding ethical banking practices. And as you all know, that one of the big problems that we faced around, especially regarding ethical and integrity matters,
Yes.
is always the question of what do people do with the monies that they get out of either corruption
Yes.
or other illegal activities.
Yes.
Ultimately, to integrate it into the financial system, they always use the banking system to do so. So I was very happy and very humbled today when I was invited by one of your banks in Uganda to come and talk to their staff leading what they call the senior leadership management team.
Yes.
And when I sat in that room, I really felt like, in terms of hierarchy, probably I ranked rather low in it, but they were humble enough to listen to me.
Yes.
So today I was a teacher. I also teach at the Strathmore Law School.
Yes.
And as I say, what gives me joy about teaching at the Strathmore Law School is that it gives me time to interact, especially with young adults, and not only teach them the law, but more importantly, be able to share with them lessons in life. That's one gap that many people are lacking and are yearning for today.
Yes, absolutely.
And in another world, I am a lawyer. So I do practice in the firm of Oraro and Company Advocates, which I joined 33 years ago.
Wow.
Rising from the office at what we call the East Wing. And now I sit in the office at the West Wing. So I have been able to, over the years, been also mentored by my founding partner, Mr. George Oraro, who has walked with me and taken me up with both my strengths and my weaknesses. And I do believe that in that respect, I also owe my community and mankind the duty or the obligation to be able to impart on them
Yes.
what I've also learned along the way.
To also invest in them like you were invested in.
Yes, we must do that. And in another field again, I have been engaged in various trusts and foundations. Very exciting, takes quite a bit of time, but even while they take their time, it's worth every minute that we do.
Yes.
Back in my village, which is not too far from the Kenya-Uganda border.
Oh, so you could be Ugandan.
Yes, as I always say that these borders were drawn in, was it in Berlin?
They were just suggestions.
Yes, they were just suggestions somewhere down, some people who didn't even live here,
Yes.
who didn't invite us on the table, partitioned and parceled out Africa into different countries and awarded themselves the bounty of that conference, which took place in Berlin between November 1884 and February 1895. Yes. So really, that's what I would say I am.
Thank you, Chacha. Well, I think that the fact that you are teaching bankers about ethics today, because bankers are supposed to be some of the most ethical people, talks about the importance of ethics to people that are out there. But speaking again of the things that we allow to divide us, especially as a continent, by the way, today, our theme for today is the concept of enough. And I need to say something about this because we were having another Fat Talk. We have these Fat Talks every Thursday on Twitter Spaces and, of course, on Smart 24 TV, who are our partners and sponsors. And while we were having an interview of a Rwandan advocate called Florida Kabasinga, Chacha interjected and asked a question, but he also made a statement and said people need to understand the concept of enough. So we said at the Fidelis Leadership Institute, we're going to have you come here and explain that. But also, Chacha, it's not by any accident that you're here. We do look for people that have something that we can learn from, especially because we want leaders, yes, who have influence and everything, but we want leaders who have been ethical, who are authentic, and also vulnerable enough, who allow themselves to be vulnerable enough to share their story. So we're very grateful that you're here. We're very lucky that you're in Uganda when we needed you. So again, to the concept of Africa and the problems that plague us, one of the problems has been these border conflicts, you know, the fact that right now it's easier for Uganda to trade and send flowers to Norway than to send flowers to Ghana. For your information, I think Madvani and other companies send flowers, roses. They export them to Norway, and the Ghanaians buy them from Norway. So a bouquet of roses is pretty expensive in Ghana because of that. And this is not because of anything except our border conflicts, the taxes, the non-tariff barriers, the fact that our leaders have failed to agree on how much to apportion to cross-border roads and infrastructure. We know very well that there's been a lot of also cross-sabotage of airlines across the region and the continent, really because we are allowing someone else's suggested boundaries to separate us. How do you think we could deal with the issue of with boundaries? And how do you think, if you had your way, what do you think about this whole concept of the boundaries versus the United Africa that Kwame Nkrumah envisioned?
Yes, that has been an interesting topic for discussion. And we first start from the basis that these boundaries as they exist today were not our doing. They were a product of a conference which took place in Berlin in 1884, between November 1884 and February 1885. And they drew these borders being informed by their respective interests rather than the interest of the local
Africans,
people. And the way they drew them, indeed, one of the very absurd situations we found ourselves between our brothers and sisters in Uganda and in Kenya is that at one particular point, we did have a cabinet minister in Uganda government, and he said he was Ugandan. And we had a vice president in Kenya who was a brother of this minister.
And he said he was Kenyan. And they were born of the same mother and father.
Born of the same mother, same father. They had different nationalities.
Wow.
And that's what it is. And indeed, you go down to the Kenya-Tanzania border.
Yes.
We have a community which, by their very nature, they're pastoralists and they migrate in search of pasture. Yes. Many a times you find they are arrested either on the Kenyan side of the border or the Tanzanian side of the border, and they are charged with a variety of offenses relating to migration.
Which is their lifestyle.
Which is their lifestyle. Fortunately, now with a bit opening up of the East Africa territory, you can go from place to place without necessarily
needing a visa
and that kind of thing. But the issue is that you're supposed to pass through border control points.
Absolutely.
So
and the trade tariffs sometimes, even the non-tariff barriers. I mean, you guys woke up and banned everything we're giving you.
I mean,
during COVID.
It is terrible. I mean, I saw some Kenya was exporting chicks to Tanzania. About 6,000 of them. And the Tanzanians impounded them and burnt them. But credit to them, during the last year's East Africa Law Society conference in Arusha, Mama Samia Suluhu came and said it was wrong.
Yes.
And she, I think, apologized.
She's done a lot to mend fences. I think I applaud her for that.
And it was something, what one says, it takes a lot of courage and humility for somebody to say, I am sorry. I mean, as we all know, there has been genocides in this continent and other continents, but you'll find that
people don't want to apologize.
Nobody ever apologizes. They may recognize that it happened, but they always fall short of saying no. But
would it be an excuse for me to say maybe we inherited it? I mean, the people who abused this continent and enslaved it still do not want to say sorry, and our leaders inherited that, and I think a lot of other bad manners, I would say. Or is that just an excuse that we need to get rid of?
You see, we need to write our own story and create our own narrative. We can no longer continue over 60 years after independence, blame those people who subdued us and took control of us. Created 54 different nation states in this continent. Such that if I have to call Uganda, I will have to go on an international tariff, which is very oppressive. Whereas in the US, our entire continent, from coast to coast, east coast to west coast, south to north,
hooked up,
it's all hooked up on one
And you
tariff.
know, the most odious thing is that you cannot trade from one country to another in Africa without that money having to first be approved in the United States of America, the SWIFT system.
Yes.
You know?
I mean, it's a sad case.
It's a very sad case.
We talk about, I will walk into a neighboring country with Kenya shillings and ask them, can I get your local currency? They say, no, we'll only change if it's dollars. And you ask yourself, why are we so enslaved? And the thing that many people also don't appreciate, that, unlike the British pound, which they tell us, I'm not sure how true it is, that it's backed by gold, the dollar is backed by nothing.
Absolutely.
It's just backed by what you say, power and might.
Yes. And we know that the euro, for instance, if it had any backing, or even the British pound, that gold did not come from England.
It was our gold?
It's also gold. Okay. I mean, I do not know about any gold mines in the UK, do you?
That's true.
But also, the funniest thing is that up to this day, the Francophone countries cannot make budgets without France having to have a say in it, because,
in fact, I'm told that
all their reserves are in France.
Foreign exchange reserves are all domiciled somewhere in France.
And I think we need to have these conversations, because I feel that our elite community, our educated people, have forgotten that there's some real economic issues we need to resolve before we go into fighting each other. Before we fight each other, we need to first look at what are the few things that unite us. Poverty. How do we address poverty? I want to admire Rwanda because of what they did after the genocide. They admitted, yes, we made a mistake. But they have this Kwivuga thing that they've kept it alive. Not Kwivuga, what is it called? It's a ceremony they do every year to remember.
Kwambuka or something.
The Kwambuka,
Yes,
it's a remembrance.
In April.
And they're not allowing themselves to forget. It's the way the Israelites will not allow themselves to forget the Passover,
And the Palestinians also don't forget the Nakba. Celebrated the 75th one earlier on this week.
Exactly. And the thing is, when we start stop looking at what divides us and start looking at what unites us, what matters to us. These cultural things that have been bothering us, I think that it would actually go a long way in solving our issues. We are going into a break soon, but before that, I just wanted you to tell me, where did you grow up?
Where I grew up?
Yeah, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Nairobi.
Yes.
And I'm not ashamed to say 1964.
Oh, wow.
So I turned 59.
1 year after, 2 years after Uganda's independence,
and
1 year after your independence.
A few months after Kenya independence.
Yes.
I studied.
So you were born independent?
Yes,
Barely.
But you know, at the time I was born, Kenya was still a dominion of the
oh, yes.
of Britain.
Yes, you are.
And Kenya became a republic in December 1964. Mm-hmm. I went to school from my nursery schooling all the way to university in Kenya.
In Kenya?
Yes,
okay.
In Nairobi.
Ah, Nairobi.
I studied in Nairobi, though I never lost touch with where my father came from.
Yes.
Where
is that?
It's called Uholo, which is in Siaya County.
Yes.
But we people of Uholo, we call it the Great Republic of Uholo. So that's where...
You're setting up even worse borders, like
the
Mijingo Island people.
No. It isn't a way. It is what we say. We must all be proud of where we come from.
Absolutely.
And not just be proud of it, but contribute towards bettering it, not just disappearing in some urban center.
Yes.
And not being, not going back to assess probably people who are less fortunate than we are.
So were you a firstborn?
No, I am the secondborn. I have an older brother, a very, I would say he's one of the people I really admire. Mm-hmm. He is, in our family, he's what one says, the very cool-headed chap.
Yes.
Yes, and every time I'm the person who engages a lot in very forceful arguments. And he'd always tell me, yes, Chacha, you're right.
So how many lawyers are in this family?
Our larger family, we are very many lawyers.
Okay. But this unit?
Yes, our unit, in my immediate family, I am the only lawyer, though I do have many nieces who are lawyers.
Thanks to you, I'm sure.
Yes, they all followed me.
Yes.
I only hope they did so for the right reasons.
Well, you've upped the gender average for lawyers in Africa.
Yes.
So thanks to your family.
Yes.
Yes. So we're going into a break right now. But when we get back, I want to hear more about the lawyer in you and what that did for the family.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. You are welcome once again. We had a fantastic session where Chacha was giving us some interesting stories about growing up in post-colonial Kenya, like freshly post-colonial. And today we're here to speak about the doctrine of enough. This is a Fidelis Fat Talk, and Chacha Odera is a prominent advocate from Kenya. And he is here to speak to us. You're welcome to Uganda once again.
Thank you.
So we're in Kampala at Smart 24 TV, all over DSTV and on Twitter Spaces. I want to thank you all for being here. And I want to say that today we're having a bit of an East African conversation, a bit of an African conversation about ethics and the doctrine of enough. What is this, Chacha, since this was your doctrine anyway?
Well, it's an interesting, one of the things that bothers those who care is just the plundering of our public resources.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter which country you are in. And I'm speaking in the African context.
Yes.
Even countries where we thought they have overcome the whole issue of
plundering,
use of public resources. Every so often a scandal comes up. And when you look at the ultimate effect of that scandal, it's twofold. One, you will find that resources are not available for what they were intended for, so that people suffer. But secondly, on the other end, you find people who have plundered these resources having so much more than they'll ever need.
They don't even
in
need
their
it.
lifetime. They don't need it.
No, you know, we have a scandal right now that's happening in Uganda. We've had iron sheets stolen from the people of Karamoja, some of whom actually have absolutely nothing. No, you know.
Yes.
And these people that these things were found with, they were rotting in their compounds. They didn't even need them. Some of them even say things just appeared in their compounds, which means that they were not concerned. They didn't even care, you know. So that's greed, right?
You see, Fiona, this is what is called the primitive accumulation of wealth. You accumulate.
Wow, the lawyer is coming out
which
now.
you don't need.
Which you don't need.
There is no utility value for it.
Yeah.
It is very much like, you know, there are sometimes you find a child, and it starts from childhood, a child who wants every toy which they can't even play with all of them. And that's the time we need to tell the child, no, you only need one toy at one given time.
But greed is in our nature, right?
Yes, I mean, it's something which is nurtured. Children are not born greedy. It's nurtured and they become greedy by socialization.
So, do you think that perhaps we have nurtured this greed? A story is told of colonialism, and I think we saw Ngugi wa Thiong'o and all these writers that wrote about that season coming out of colonialism. And first of all, colonialism worked with collaborators, people who are willing to snitch and enslave their own communities in exchange for mirrors, cowrie shells, and I don't know what else. We had chiefs who are collaborators. We had slaves who are collaborators, and they benefited greatly. And because they benefited greatly, they were awarded. And I think this is the legacy across Africa. They were rewarded, and their children were the ones that were first educated. And then the second thing that happened with colonialism is when the colonialists were leaving, it is to these people that they handed what they called the republic issues, you know, you're going to be the prime minister. And the first thing a lot of these people did was even wipe away the kingdoms, the monarchies that had already existed.
This is especially in Uganda, you know, Kenya.
There's Uganda, yes. There's Uganda, there is even Leopold, Congo, where,
Congo.
So we had even, well, you had like the Mau Mau rebellion and everything. So there were different communities that had set precepts and had set leaders, but because these leaders knew who they were and were not willing, even in Nigeria, these things happen, were not willing, Mansa Musa, you know, were not willing to cede their power, cede their land, they were betrayed by these people who were eventually rewarded. And again, I'm getting these themes from some of the stories that have been written. So the collaborators who benefited, their children take over, and it is their turn to eat. Someone I know wrote a book saying,
John Gidongo,
yes, John Gidongo wrote, it's our turn. Yeah, Michaela, yeah.
She's the one who wrote the book.
Yes.
But let me tell you something.
So in our turn to eat, we get there, we get independence, then we get these leaders, and then they don't want to leave, and then there's a whole sea of revolutions across Africa, and then it starts sort of a bloodbath, and we think we're getting better, but then also for these people it's also their turn to eat. So right now what we're dealing with, for instance, in Uganda with these iron sheets, I think people feel that finally, because they're in power, it is their turn to eat. So what I'm trying to say is, can we blame these people? But also, can we cure ourselves with such a legacy?
Yeah, Fiona.
Not legacy, such a past.
Let me tell you, Fiona. We have whipped and flogged that colonial excuse for too long.
Yes.
60 years in, people who were born at independence have retired, having served a full term in employment.
Yes.
Their grandfathers and grandmothers.
Yes.
We can't continue blaming the colonial legacy. And speaking about Kenya, the Kenya nation state as we have it today was a model which was put together in a negotiated conference in Lancaster.
It was negotiated.
It was negotiated.
Was there a power balance?
That's what they tried. It was
Yes.
really to protect what they say, protection of the right to property.
Yes.
By that time, the only people
For
who
the
owned
settlers.
property were the settlers. And that's the same position you found the South Africans had
Yes.
to negotiate.
And Zimbabwe.
Yes, and Zimbabwe and all those. Zimbabwe also went to Lancaster House to negotiate
Yes.
the independence. So at that particular time, our leaders then said, well, you know, let's first get independence and then we can
We'll
deal
figure it out.
with other matters later. And they did that. But of course, when they got into power, they appreciated
They got busy
the
eating.
trappings that come with power.
Yes.
And I wouldn't blame them entirely. I would blame we people
For letting them.
for letting them do that.
Yes.
Because what happened, like in many countries just emerging from
Colonial.
rule,
Yes.
or even from a difficult period, one of the things that we do is that we are united by the suffering which we went through.
Yes.
And when one of us, especially
Prospers.
if they're in leadership, starts getting off course,
We're divided.
yeah, no, we usually try saying, oh, excuse them, oh, you know, that man suffered or that lady suffered, sacrificed so much for us, just let's go slow on him.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem begins. That's
Oh
where the
yes.
brain starts beating us.
I think we've experienced quite
Yes.
a lot of that.
And then you find a person takes power. There's a system which worked before the colonial time, where
It's
we
no
did-
longer working.
we decide, no, that system, it will be in competition with the power which I yield. So the kings and the chiefs,
Let me wash it down.
let me get them out.
Yes.
Because we want what they say, the patriotic core for
Yes.
unity and
Yes.
have one country.
Yeah.
So we then, like in Kenya, we had a set of people, which, okay, there were kind of number of people who may have had the what one would call interactions with the colonial power. They were appointed chiefs. And when you talk to them, they'll tell you that, you know, the good book, the Bible, talks somewhere in Romans that you must respect leadership. It comes from God. So what happens?
So
People-
don't say anything to the
Yeah, don't say
leaders
anything.
or about
A
the
leader,
leaders.
whoever bad is, you must accommodate
Yeah.
him. That is
Yes.
God who's punishing us.
I believe in Africa we're quite polite and respectful, overly respectful of
Yes.
our leaders. I mean, it's only, we call it a Western thing to question authority, right?
We
Almost.
you know, we got this religion called Christianity,
Yes.
and we embraced it, and we embraced it well, and there was nothing wrong with that. And indeed, the Bible was interpreted in a manner as to perpetuate some of these things that
Like to
eras
perpetuate, you have to be almost, you have to
You
let
have to be
the leader
submissive to
rule. You have to
authority.
be submissive
And
to
you must also
authority.
be forgiving. If somebody steals your cow, you give
Turn
him
the other
another cow.
cheek.
If somebody
But that
slaps
is
you,
the gospel, Chacha.
that's what they say. When
Yes.
they say that when somebody slaps one cheek, you give him the other.
Yes.
And then you're told, sit behind, you'll be called in front.
Yes.
But in reality today,
Yes.
if you sit in front, nobody will call you. If you sit behind, nobody will call you in
Are
front.
you serious?
If you turn the other cheek, somebody will punch your stomach. So if you remove your coat for somebody, they'll probably remove your trousers.
Okay, so yes, we were taught Christianity, but capitalism and all these other things were changing the world as well. But I think that one of the things you say, from what I'm hearing, is it's high time we stopped using the past as an excuse and move forward. There are other things that I think have informed our moving forward with the grid. And I think that that is a lack of systems to trust. Why? Because originally we had, from coming again from colonialism, we had systems that worked, as you said, in many places. We had schools, even the Christianity brought serious missionary schools that were working perfectly. But the moment they were taken over, some of our own schools here, the moment they're taken over, then you have the corruption, the problems, the standards go down. And I think that I love how you've said that there's been a lot of enabling of our leaders. in their bad behavior, because we're coming from a place of we need to respect and honor them, regardless of what they're doing. But we are woke now. I mean, we have generation, someone shocked me, we're now with generation Alpha. We used to have Z, we're now at Alpha.
We've started all over
Exactly. The Greta Thunbergs of this world right now. The environmentalists, the young people who are really willing to ask the questions. What would you say to them? What can they do different? Because, well, you and I are also a whole other chapter, because the millennials, well, I think I'm one of the millennials. The millennials now came in, and then there's this whole wave of change around the time the millennials were coming in, the 70s, 80s. And what you see in the 70s and 80s is Africa trying to redefine itself and throw off the cloak of post-colonial issues. But now we were also beset with the American situation, the Western influences, and we took the good with the bad. So right now, one of the things that is killing our nations is that because of the individualistic greed, our nations also are learning that selfishness. So how would you talk to Generation Z, for instance?
Okay, thank you. Let's first start from where you began about systems. One thing we must appreciate, that a system is only as good as the people who enforce it. You can have all the great systems.
It's all about enforcement.
Yes, I mean, if you give crooks to enforce a system, they'll enforce it the best way that they know.
Yes.
So at the end of it all, let's not think a system is a really abstract thing which is only given life by the people
who enforce it.
So we must never be complacent. I do recall soon after South Africa got its independence, I had the opportunity of having tea. Actually, it was a function of the High Commission.
Yeah.
And the then High Commissioner was so optimistic about South Africa.
Yes.
And he spoke a great deal about they have a great constitution, they have institutions which have constitutional underpinnings and all those kind of things. And being the pessimist that I was, having seen quite a bit,
yeah.
I just told him, the same way you remember what we call the Ides of March.
Yes.
When Julius Caesar was warned, be careful, it's the Ides of March, 15th of March. I also told him, be careful about the 20-year independence cycle.
What is that?
In Kenya, and Kenyans will accept this,
yes.
Between 1963 and 1983, in spite of the decline that we were seeing or some of the many bad things that were happening, there were years of prosperity.
Oh.
We did well.
Those were the 20 years of prosperity.
20 years of prosperity.
Yes.
In Zimbabwe,
yes.
They got independence in 1980. By 2000, they were over the hill and they started the downhill.
Yeah, they were really doing well in Zimbabwe.
So South Africa got independence in 1994. And I told this High Commissioner, just be careful about it. And he told me, no,
this is 2003
Yeah,
and
it won't happen.
They had load shedding.
Yeah.
You were there the other day,
Yes.
and you were telling me
So
too.
then what happened is that I happened to visit South Africa. I think it was about 2010. I think there were 16 years into independence. Or
Yes.
About 16 years into independence. And I bumped into this friend of mine at the Sandton Mall, and we sat down and had coffee this time. And he told me that, Chacha, you know, you told me about the 20 years cycle. He seemed to have hit it before.
Yes.
And by 2012,
That's
going
when
on to
SAA
2014,
was collapsing.
we then started getting xenophobia.
Xenophobia.
We started getting all these problems that you're seeing.
Yes.
And when
the high crime rates.
high crime rates, and then next we now hear is power outages. And the only
Who would
way...
have thought?
Who would have thought? A country
I
like
mean,
South
when
Africa.
you're in South Africa, they tell you, oh, you're from Africa.
Yes. So what I found interesting is that the rest of us in Africa, we all accept that when there's no power, we switch off lights.
We're used to
And
that,
we
right?
call it power rationing. And that's what it is.
Load shedding.
In South Africa, so as to make it look better than what the rest of Africa has been going through, they call it load shedding. But the effect of it is the same. There are certain hours when there is no power. So
like permanently,
yes.
This is set.
It is.
It's not like a shed.
And they tell us for the next 2 years, and in fact what they did sometime in February is that they appointed a minister specifically for electricity to deal with just the electricity component of energy.
Wow.
So then let's fast forward to the generation that we are now looking at.
Alpha.
The alpha generation. This is an endangered generation.
Extremely.
In the sense of the lack of role models that they have.
Wow.
We have ourselves as the generation ahead of them.
Yes.
We have drummed into them that at the end of the day, what one requires is money.
To get
How
anywhere,
you get
to do
it
anything.
doesn't matter. Indeed, I recall when I was growing up, my father used to tell me that it is not how much money you have that matters. What matters is how you got that money. So it isn't a question.
Nobody cares here.
Yeah.
I mean,
They say the end
I'll
justifies
give
the
you a
means.
crazy situation. There's a time, God bless his soul, we had a gentleman who had, I think, been convicted of a crime in the United States and done time. And when he was released, he was welcomed by throngs of crowds from here all the way to Entebbe Airport. And immediately he came here, he ran for mayor of the capital city, and he won. And one of the things that got him to, people are saying, oh, he was able to steal Muzungu money, he's very clever. And it's gone on because we have scandals being, while, scandals are released about maybe ministers, things happen in election years, and our people vote these people back in. So sometimes I think nobody cares where the money came from, as you said.
And that's why we cannot complain. We get the leaders that we deserve. Somebody has a track record.
Yes.
Somebody is a well-known criminal or a convict, and yet those are the people. And it's the same thing like my friend Professor P.L.O. Lumumba would say. If you get a hyena to look after goats, you can't come back and be surprised
complain
that the hyena has eaten the goats. That's exactly what it is.
It's their nature.
That's their nature. That's the expectation.
Nature.
In fact, if you find your goats there, that's when you should be concerned that what happened? How come it didn't eat the goats?
So if you're a young person and you want to cause change, how do we work out the issue of enough? How does a young person out there coach themselves into this doctrine of enough? And I know that the young people out there will say, oh, Chacha, you arrived already. I mean, you've made all the bucks in Kenya and beyond. You're probably paid in dollars and stuff. So you could say enough.
Now, let me tell you, Fiona, let me stop you there. You see,
yes.
Let me tell you, I wouldn't say that.
We call it having arrived in Uganda.
Yeah, having arrived. I mean,
yes.
But if you set a destination which is impossible to get, what happens ultimately? There's so much pressure upon you to get there. And in this context, you will be stealing so much because you have set such a high target, a target which is not even useful. And that's where the word enough comes. You must be able to set a target which you know that if I have attained a certain level of income, or certain resources or assets, that is enough to take care of me. And the interesting thing is that, let me just give you an example.
Yes.
If today, let's say, example, I'm earning $10,000 per month, and you are earning $30,000 a month, do you know the quality of our lives is the same?
It's the same.
If you want to,
we just have reserves.
Yeah. And those reserves, what do you need?
But you can only stay in one house at a time.
You can only do that. I mean, we'll stay in the same neighborhood, our children go to the same school. And that's the thing people don't appreciate. That at the end of it, any monies beyond a certain amount, as you say, you call it
beyond
reserve,
the basic.
but I call it primitive accumulation. You're just keeping it there and you never use it.
And sometimes you even die without your wife or children ever knowing it's there.
And that's where lawyers in Kenya get business.
I know.
You find all this litigation taking place. You never find people litigating in an estate of a poor person.
Yes, actually.
Estate of rich people. So, and you said, there was a time I recall, I had an interesting encounter with a client who, in preparation of his death, which of course we all assured will happen to us,
Yes.
he asked me to draw a will for him. And he came from the Kikuyu community, and he was very well endowed. And amongst the Kikuyus, their naming system is that the first son who in a marriage is named after the father's father, which means the child's grandfather.
Yes.
Paternal grandfather. The second son is named after the maternal grandfather. The first daughter is named after the paternal grandmother, and the second daughter after the maternal grandmother. So when this guy came and told me he wanted to create a trust where his assets will not be distributed with the first generation, it will be distributed in the second generation, I first thought that probably this guy, because his grandchildren are named after him and his wife,
that's who he's
he loves them
after.
so much and he wants to give the assets. He told me, no. The amount of assets he had, he told me, it would generate some income which, from the income, it would be able to give his children some money, but the children will have to work in order to sustain a lifestyle.
Yes.
And
that's a tough dad.
After a certain age, the trust is dissolved and the property is distributed to his grandchildren.
Yes.
And
by then the children will have no use for it.
Yes, and then what he told me is that if he gave his own children these assets, the children will not
work.
They won't have to work.
They'll even waste it. We've seen kingdoms being wasted.
But the problem here is even beyond that. His children don't work. The grandchildren observe their parents and learn even worse. They learn things that you don't have to work because they can see they're able to go on with life. So by the time you get the second generation, the assets have been wasted, and those children, having not seen their parents work, they may have chosen also not to work. They sit and wait for the end of month.
He was thinking about his third generation. He
was thinking of the generation. So sometimes,
with his wealth.
Yeah, sometimes this inheritance, it may sound sweet, it may be a good thing, but it could also be a poison chalice. And that's why estate planning is extremely important.
You know about this gentleman in Dubai, the one I think who came up in Dubai, who said that hard times create hard men who create good times that in turn create weak men. That's true. So, that was the Emir. Yes, and I remember Okonko in Things Fall Apart saying fire begets ashes. On that, we're taking a break right now. We'll be back with Fat Talks, talking about the doctrine of enough, hearing from the wisdom of Chacha Hilary Odera, all the way from Kenya. Welcome once again. We're still talking about the doctrine of enough from Chacha Odera, Oraro and Company Advocate, Senior Partner, all the way from Kenya. You're welcome once again. Thank you. This is a Fat Talk, and tell me, Chacha, the issue of enough. I love what your client did there, and I have some friends who are Asians, and they told me that some of the secrets to Asians' wealth is that they don't plan for their children. They plan for their grandchildren, just like that man said, because they want each generation to work for the wealth they have. And one of the things that you have said that's really profound is that you have to set for yourself a target. Sometimes I think our politicians and other people that sort of fall into opportunities are taken by surprise. I'm not sure, maybe because they never even had a target in the first place. So, and especially this happens with ill-gotten wealth. But for someone who is planning to get wealthy, who's in their 20s and they're working very hard, how would you go about setting a target? And two, how do you think this can be taken to the bigger picture for Africa, especially for policymakers out there? How can we help our people plan? Because someone said without a successor, there's no success. How can we help our countries plan for the next generations? I mean, we're plundering forests, we're doing these things that might ensure that there's no life for our children or our children's children. We're taking loans, you know,
Yes.
and building bad roads and dams. You know, we have 2 dams in Uganda that might cost us a lot to either rebuild or whatever. And what this is going to do is it's going to plunge our children into even further debt.
Well, Kenya, we have many more dams which
Which are
we
damaged.
struggling with.
Yeah.
But first of all, I think even as one sets targets, you must be content.
Already.
Yes.
You
I
should
mean,
have
you must first
a
of
sense
all
of contentment.
Contentment, yes.
Yeah.
One thing you must ensure that you do is to manage your expectations. Don't start thinking that success is necessarily how much money you have in the bank or how many assets that you have.
Yeah.
That's not really what it is. I mean, there are people who today are more concerned about preservation of the environment.
Yes.
And they're doing so much in order to ensure that they will give the earth, they'll give their children and their grandchildren a better place
to live.
And what are we doing as some of we greedy people in this continent? It is money we are pursuing at whatever cost. Whether you will chop down the entire forest, whatever.
It reminds me of Esau, where we're exchanging a bowl of soup now
for inheritance.
and losing our birthright.
Your birthright, yeah.
That's very interesting. So I like where you're coming from with contentment, because if you're not content, even it's like that rich man in the Bible who had all these sheep, all these, you know, herds, and he still went for the neighbor's one lamb, you know. And what that does for you is you're never content, you're never happy. And I guess it comes down to, I think it was Gandhi who talked about, with wealth, it's not important how much wealth you have, but what you do with what you have.
That's true. Indeed, as I always say, that I do recall there was a time when, in a moment of frustration, I was telling my father that I am so tired of all the demands on what I had.
Yeah.
People asking for contribution here, contribution there. And he asked me something. Would you rather be the person who's being asked, or would you rather be the person who's asking?
Who's asking?
So then I thought about it.
Wow.
And then he told me that
that's profound.
Yeah. Then he told me, you know, what you have, you're merely a trustee.
Oh, wow.
You are a custodian of it.
That's
and
profound.
What you must use those resources and those blessings for should be for the betterment of other people. You can't develop a selfish approach that you want to make all this, you want to keep it somewhere. And the truth be told, you have to be a strange human being to be able to enjoy your wealth when people who are close to you, whether they are friends, relatives, or even family members, can't put a meal on the table.
Yes.
So one must, and when you now do it in a way that you're accumulating all these resources and all this wealth by plundering what otherwise would have been used for a greater public good.
Yes.
The problem that you're creating will go from one generation to the other. I was talking to some friends of mine from West Africa last week, and they told me something very interesting. That a lot of resources that a country has, if properly applied, would be able to be for the betterment and for the enjoyment
of the mass population.
Of the mass population.
Yes.
But then people steal.
And they take the majority of it for themselves.
That means that there are no proper schools, no proper hospitals, terrible roads, no power.
Then you have high crime rates. Even the few rich ones are not safe.
You can't sleep. And then
you can't even take your children to the hospital in your country.
And then what do the rich guys do who plunder the country? They look for self-help solutions.
Yes.
When the power is
they
going
have
off,
homes in Switzerland, but
when the power goes off,
generators.
let's say in Lagos, generators, and the whole neighborhood
Lagos.
is making noise. When the roads,
Everyone has a generator.
Yeah, when the roads are bad, you buy a 4-wheel drive.
No one is thinking, let's contribute and make sure the power comes.
You hire private
buy a gun.
guards. And then on the other thing, when the public school system has broken down,
take them to
you
Harvard.
Send your children. No, Harvard is not for rich people. It's for people with brains. So most times you find some of these people, even if they have the money, they can't get there.
Yeah.
So you find that if a system worked,
everyone would benefit.
we wouldn't need private schools, we need private hospitals, we wouldn't even need private cars. You would take public transport.
No, we have doctors now in government hospitals who will go to the hospital and will not touch a pregnant mother who needs help because he doesn't have gloves, But guess what? He has a clinic, a private clinic, where he is channeling all that stuff. So he'll even give you a business card and tell you, if you find me at the clinic, and then you go there and he'll charge you top dollar. So I want to end as we're ending, Chacha, and I want to thank you so much. I just want to give you a small story. I know this is about interviewing you, but I'm very inspired by a gentleman we've just lost. He's called the late Honorable Kumringa, and he was Patrick Okumringa. He was a minister, and he served many governments. And at some point, I was told this story just recently, and at some point he used to, I think he owned a distributorship for Tata lorries or something, and he had a transport system where they would take like food and things to Juba. Yes. And that time there was no transport. So people would travel to the north in those Tata lorries. And then he thought to himself, because the roads were so bad that if you're moving from Jinja to Kampala, it's 2 days. But so you have to sleep like in Kampala.
That's how long?
So he put, so he put in along the whole northern region, he put little lodges, He put lodges, and people had almost free accommodation. Like the lorry would stop there for rest. People would be assured of having accommodation and sleep and food. And they took these places, where the lorries used to park. There were communities. Communities grew around that. And someone was telling me that this man was profound. Every time he had wealth, he shared, and he used it to develop his community. And I was also touched when I remembered that recently the Chief Justice wrote a book, and the stories he tells you are of people who gave of their time because they felt they had gotten enough for themselves, and now they wanted to give back. And I think that I'm going to end by asking you, how are you giving back right now, Chacha?
Well, that's a topic which I've been very shy to talk about.
Yeah.
But let me give you
But it could inspire someone out there.
Okay,
I mean,
thanks.
We have over 10,000 lawyers in East Africa. Yeah.
I sit first of all, I sit in a trust.
Yes.
Called Msaada Trust. Msaada Trust is an interesting trust in the sense that it was conceived by old boys of Lenana School, Nairobi.
Yes.
Well, they were in
where
Lenana,
you studied.
Yeah, where I studied.
Yeah.
While they were in Lenana, it was called the Duke of York. So these are people who left Lenana School way back in the late 50s and early 60s. And they decided they want to give back. And they started, because they are now that generation of people who are planning their estates. And many of them decided what we will do is we will provide something small to give back to the school in Africa, because most of these guys are in the US, they're in Canada, they're in the UK, they're in France, they're in Australia.
And most were even Europeans.
Yeah, they're Europeans. I mean, truth be told, they were all Europeans.
Oh, wow.
All of them.
Wow.
And they got together. And they started running this trust. And then they realized that they needed people, boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. And I was amongst the people who were invited. And I do recall visiting one of them in France. And the passion which these guys exhibited. I asked myself, these guys, they don't have children in Africa.
Yeah.
They don't have relatives. Why should they care so much about African children?
So does it give scholarships? What does it do?
That's what we do. So they gather money from that. We also fundraise locally. Other than that, I have another trust which is it's called Changes 77 Trust. Changes is the
I
name.
like 77.
Yeah. The significance of it is that Lenana School, where I went to, the nickname of Lenana School is Changes. I mean, it changes people. Guys coming from the village become British quite quickly.
Yes.
They become Anglophone.
Yes.
And it is so it's called Changes. We went to school on January 23rd, 1977. So our class
Oh,
group,
that's why it's called.
yes, our
so it's your
group,
class group.
Yes,
Ah.
and I chaired the foundation, and every year
Yeah.
we sponsor at least 5 children. And it's an end-to-end sponsorship from entry to the time when you leave.
Wow.
So we don't want to give children money, and then second year they don't have money to continue. And then I also was a founding trustee of a hospital back in my village. In partnership with some Canadians, we did quite a great job, and we call it the Matibabu Foundation.
So you're being salt to the earth.
Yes, and the other
Giving
thing
back
is that
where you came from.
you know, I am what we call a Paul Harris Fellow, but my
Oh,
fellowship
Rotary,
is
yes.
an interesting one because I am not a Rotarian.
Oh, you're
But-
not?
Yeah, my wife is a passionate
Okay.
Rotarian.
Oh, but
by
you're
my
the
contribution-
husband that contributes.
Yeah, by my contribution, they did honor me by
Giving you a Paul Harris.
PHF, as they call it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes, it is that.
On
And then,
behalf
well,
of the Rotary Club of Chuatule, I think I'm going to invite you
thank you.
to come and visit.
Okay, and then over and above that, of course, we do have there are children who I personally sponsor. And my law firm also, we do a lot of, we hate calling it corporate social responsibility. We just call it, being part of being part of humanity.
Yes.
And there was a time we went visiting some old people's home. I mean, actually, some Catholic nuns came to see us. And they told us that they didn't have money to pay the power bill. It was an old people's home.
Oh, wow.
So the first reaction was, why don't you just write a check and pay that power bill? Then we realized, what about next month and the month after? So we went to the old people's home. We looked through it. We got assessment. And they're now running
A solar
80%
thing?
on solar.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And then we went to another children's home. They had problem with water.
I like your
and
Lenana.
all
It's
those
called
kind of things.
Change Makers.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. No, thank you.
Yes.
Yes. So, but you know, it is, I keep on telling guys that it is your individual responsibility. And by you carrying out your individual responsibility, collectively, we make a difference to people.
Wow. This couldn't have ended on a better note. This is how you create a critical mass of ethical leaders that are going to transform Africa, that are determined to be the change they seek. And if you understand the doctrine of enough, it means that if you have food on your table, you're able to sleep at night, that means you should be able to think about someone else more unfortunate than yourself, think about a community where you can give back, but also think about what you are going to pay forward to the next generation for everything that God and everyone else has invested in you. It's been Fiona Wall from the Fidelis Leadership Institute, which has been sponsored by Smart24 TV, hosting the fantastic, great, humble Chacha Odera, the man of many stories, from all the way from Kenya, from Uholo village, the great nation, the great Republic of Uholo. It's been faithful, available, teachable talks. See you next Thursday. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic weekend, and remember to be a faithful, available, and teachable leader who knows when enough is enough.